Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today. We're very excited to talk about the Chesterfield Active Transportation Plan this morning, and we are joined by, let me find my controls for the screen here, quick. We are joined by JJ Banuela, Senior Transportation Engineer with Chesterfield County. My name is Natalie Rayner. I'm the Engagement Manager for Bike Walk RBA. We advocate for comfortable and connected places for people to bike and walk in the Richmond region, which includes Chesterfield. And we're so excited to hear about what Chesterfield has planned for active transportation in the county over the next couple of decades. So with that being said, I'll hand things over to JJ to introduce himself, and then we'll switch screens and start talking about the plan.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. As Natalie mentioned, I am JJ Banuelos with the Chesterfield Transportation Department, and I've been with the county for about 2 years now, and I've had the privilege to work on this update to our Bikeways and Trails plan. And so before I dive into our story map that we have out for review, I'll start with some context. So with this update, we are focusing on advancing the development of a safe transportation network that increases access for non-vehicular travel to community destinations. The new network will provide a long-term vision that will guide the public projects as well as the private development projects. This network will take generations to complete, and with how much Chesterfield continues to grow and the amount of readily available data, we took this chance to relook at the network as a whole using a data-driven approach. And so earlier this year, a survey was conducted to determine the level of support for these types of facilities and what the public would want to see for these types of facilities. And so the results of those surveys indicated that there is strong support in Chesterfield County for bike ped facilities. And one thing that was important to note is a lot of people do not feel comfortable in bike lanes on high-speed roads that have high volumes. And so really they want to see a physically separated facility in the county. And so using the results of the survey and available data, we've created a draft vision map for public comment. We're asking individuals to zoom into where you live, where you work, and where you play, and provide input on if you agree with what is shown, disagree, or notice something is missing. And so with that, I will share my screen.
Okay.
And then can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. And so with that, we have organized our network into 3 prioritization tiers. They are spines, spurs, and connectors. And the intention is that spines and spurs are planned to be shared use paths, separated from traffic, and the connectors are actually intended to be more flexible and make sure we can still provide connections, but really look at the neighborhood context or the road context to see what would be more appropriate, whether it's a shared use path or maybe it's just striping and signage on a low volume, low speed subdivision road. And so a little more diving into these terms, the spines are serving as the county's backbone corridors and designed to carry the greatest volumes of bicyclists and connect across the region. And spurs provide important secondary connections between the spines and additional community destinations. And then the connectors were laid out after we had the spine and spurs to strengthen the network to key community destinations, such as schools, parks, and employment centers, as well as getting neighborhoods to the spine and spurs where it made sense. And so to start off, we started with our existing 2015 Bikeways and Trails plan. We brainstormed our lessons learned over the years with installing these type of infrastructure. And one of the main things that we did was look at the unfeasible routes. And so it may take a second to load. There we go. And so, especially in Chesterfield County, from this map, you can see we have a lot of environmental resources. And so we tried to eliminate the lines we knew would be too much of an uphill battle for both public and private projects. And some of the other lines that had to actually be removed was where, development came in and that route is no longer feasible because they've developed that parcel out without that connection. And so from there, once we finished removing lines, we built the primary spines and spur network off of that. And with that, a guiding principle that we are proposing with this plan is that any newly constructed thoroughfare plan road would be required to include bicyclist and pedestrian accommodations, even if not shown on the vision map. And so kind of how we started to come up with the prioritization between the spines and spurs. We started looking at the regional trail and bikeway initiatives, including Fall Line Trail, East Coast Greenway, and US Bike Route 1. We also looked at the surrounding localities multimodal plans, as well as the regional Tri-Cities and Plan RVA plans as well. We also looked at the recommendations from local, regional, and state studies for these types of infrastructure in our county, as well as looking at the federal guidelines for what would be an appropriate facility based on the roadway characteristics, such as speed and volume. And I like to point out from this map that per the federal guidelines, it is saying there needs to be something on almost every road in Chesterfield. And then we also cross-referenced our land use plan as well. And then once we had all that information, we started to add the connectors in to improve the safety and coverage. And some of the parameters we looked at as we started to build that out was VDOT's pedestrian and bike safety action plan, which identifies some of the most dangerous roads for bikes and pedestrians in the state. And we're fortunate enough to actually have been able to create our own high injury network through the Safe Streets and Roads for All action plan. And we also looked at all of our local special area plans and tried to incorporate all of those recommendations. We also looked at what's been constructed since the 2015 plan, as well as what's in the pipeline and already funded, so that we make sure that we're not building a network that we aren't going to be able to connect with the infrastructure that's already planned. And then we also cross-reference all of our community destinations, such as the park, schools, employment centers, hospitals. We really want to make sure that we can get the community to these destinations. And so at the end of the story map, this is where we actually have the full network. And this is where we would ask individuals to zoom in and really evaluate where they work, live, and play, and see if they agree, disagree, or think we're missing something. And this is the link that will take you to the survey. That survey is open until December 1st. And we would really like to hear from as many individuals as we can throughout the county, and to just kind of discuss next steps as well. We are currently getting input on this vision map, and the next steps will be to prioritize the network based on a variety of parameters that we're still working through. But one definitely is going to be safety. And then we also have to fiscally constrain this plan. And so we are going to be looking at what we've historically been successful with obtaining for bike and ped infrastructure, and try to use that to estimate, say, the next 20 years, what we can realistically get done. And then we would go back to the public once we have a draft chapter and that draft fiscally constrained plan, and get their input on that, and then go on to our planning commission and board of supervisors to get adoption. And with that, I will open up the floor for questions.
Thank you, JJ. This is Natalie speaking. So I would love if you could maybe zoom in on the map a little bit and just help us to kind of navigate what we're looking at here. This is a very detailed map. There's a lot of different colors. maybe if you could like zoom in on a section that has a few different colors and walk us through what each of the little like triangles, squares, blue, red, pink, what it all means.
Yes. And so to I think the big story that I like to start with is based on the legend, anything that does not have a yellow circle or yellow square is an existing shared use path. And when you look at it county-wide, we do not have a lot of existing shared use path. And so it is a step in the right direction with this vision map, but we have a lot of work to do to build out the network, and is the reason that it will take generations to come to build this network out. Let's see. I think some of a good area to start will be over on the Fall Line Trail in Bensley community to talk through some of them. And so, as you see, we currently have a triangle with a red line shown along Route 1, and that represents that there's no existing facility at this time. And then, let's see. Then you have Dundas Road, which is a spur to the Fall Line Trail, and that has triangles as well over its blue line. And that means that there's also no existing facility. But then halfway through, we actually have existing sidewalk. And so we actually changed that designation to a square. And some of the reasons we started identifying existing infrastructure is because of when we go to prioritize the network, the existing infrastructure will play a role in that because the network is, lacking a lot of connections. We may put the areas that have some sort of existing facility lower on the prioritization list. And then this pink line right here is a connector. And I believe this is actually from our Northern Route 1 special area plan. It was envisioned to get individuals down to some of the community destinations such as Bensley Park, and also strengthen the neighborhood connections to the Fall Line Trail as well as these spurs. And so that these pink lines are the ones that are intended to be flexible. And so the thought process is when we would go after funding or start a project, we would look at this road, determine what would be the most feasible approach, whether that is striping and signage on the road, an actual shared use path. It would just depend as we go through that. And then let's see. The other ones that are circles over the blue and red, and those represent existing bike lanes. And so some of the ones that are probably more known throughout the county are along Route 10 and Courthouse Road, where we have existing bike lanes for a good stretch of the corridor. And so it's a lot of information as you digest it, but that's kind of why we were asking individuals to zoom in and really just take the time to see what we're proposing, what exists out there, and help inform us as what they want to see.
Could you speak a little bit to like this view that we have right now? We can see Pocahontas State Park here, and we see a lot of colored lines around the park, but then inside the park, there's nothing that is in the plan. Can you just speak a little bit about maybe if people are confused about why they don't see existing infrastructure that might be inside a Chesterfield County park or in a state park on the plan?
Absolutely. So the focus with this plan is really the active transportation aspect. And that's a big shift from our previous plan where it was both transportation and recreation. And so with the focus on that, our thought process at this time is to get individuals to these parks, and then especially with the state park, they have their own master plans and they are building out their network appropriately. So we are routing individuals specifically for Pocahontas to one of the first parking lots that we find in that area. And that's that thought process. And we are also trying to do that with our own parks. And we're still working through that a little bit. But the thought process was we're getting the individuals to our county parks, and that's the goal of the plan. And then what happens within the park is a different story based on what county parks and rec has planned.
Thank you. So another question that I have is, this is a ton of planned bike and ped infrastructure. I'm not sure, I think I heard maybe like 350 miles approximately is on this plan.
Yeah.
Um, how are these segments prioritized? And I think you've talked a little bit about how long it might take to implement all of this, but can you talk a little bit about how some of these may be chosen over others and what we can really expect for implementation?
Yes. So definitely two parameters that will drive this are safety and density. We're trying to get the most bang for our buck with some of these installations, as well as make meaningful connections. And so I think I'll walk through a couple examples. So on Route 1, we've actually been successful with building shared use path with development. And so we have a good amount built just north of Route 10. And the thought process is that this stretch of Route 1 might rise to the top of our prioritization because we could make a meaningful connection with a lot that's already built. And so we could get more bang for our buck there. And then a lot of the safety ones, aside from Route 1, are also along Route 60 and 360. And more specifically, Route 60 has the safety problem as well as the density. And so that may be a lot of the lines there may be ones that we're looking at to figure out which one makes the most sense to implement first. And
Fantastic. And then could you share again how long you expect this implementation process to last for this plan?
yes, we fully expect to be able to build out this network fully. It's going to be generations, so definitely a 50 plus time frame. But in terms of the prioritization and the implementation plan, we're going to get that estimate of miles based on the funding that we come up with and see how much we will actually complete within I think we're leaning towards 20 years. And so that way we can measure how successful we are when we as we continue to build out the network and get to that 20-year mark.
Could you speak a little bit more about the guideline that you briefly mentioned that I think will require any new roads in the county to include bike and pedestrian facilities? And is
Yes.
this, I think it was called a guideline. Is this legally binding? Is it a requirement? Could you just speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the thought or the intention here is to write it into the chapter and make it a requirement. And we may have to make some updates here and there to make sure it's implementable. But primarily, the thought process with any newly constructed thoroughfare plan road, we have that network, identified currently. However, especially in some of these areas in the Western County, the destinations and origins have not been established. And so we want the flexibility as development goes out to these undeveloped areas to look at the network when development comes in to provide the most meaningful connections based on what's coming in. And this would also help with when we go to do our update to our thoroughfare plan road. If we're showing all of those old existing ones, then our plan would also be essentially out of date, and would have to go back and forth and reference the any updates to the thoroughfare plan as they occur. And so that's kind of the thought process is that we want to make sure we capture those areas um, because they are important to build out the network even further.
So, kind of getting into a little bit more granular questions here. Do you have a favorite plan or project that's in here? Is there any particular section of this plan that is the most exciting to you?
Yes. So as many others probably in the area feel that the Fall Line Trail is a very great infrastructure improvement that is making traction throughout the region. And so a lot of our, or a few of our projects are actually already planning to build off of that. And so aside from the southern segment going from Petersburg to Route 10, one of the ones I'm really excited to see get built out is back in this Bensley Bellwood area. We, if I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we are starting construction from Ellingham to Marina for the Fall Line Trail. We are funded, and I believe it's in right of way from Marina up to the Food Lion, I believe. And so we have a really long stretch on the northern side of our county that is in the pipeline funded, and we're working towards getting that built. And then some of these spurs like Dundas, we have a project that is going to connect to the Fall Line Trail and connect to the Bensley Elementary School down here as well. And that's just kind of like a high level view of some of our projects that I'm most excited for. And I'm most excited for this area just because it's going to see a lot of connections, meaningful connections, especially like all the way to Hopkins, because we do have another project that's doing the Meadowdale Boulevard, where it's going to have bike lanes and sidewalk. And then VDOT is currently replacing this bridge and including bike and ped facilities on it. And so slowly but surely, this network is getting built out, and we'll start seeing some meaningful connections in the next few years.
That's really exciting. I know there's a lot of people who may be using the Fall Line Trail as just a safe place to walk. So I think that that neighborhood that you were highlighting could really use greater safety in pedestrian facilities. Is there anything that you can say about the plan as a whole that makes this plan super exciting for the county, or anything that makes it really special compared to maybe where we were in the previous plans or in previous iterations of active transportation in the county?
Yes, I think the not to say that the old plan did not use data to be created, but I think there's just so much more data available to us today, and that all of the surrounding localities, as well as the regional partners, are creating a lot of their own plans, studying these areas. And so it makes it a lot easier to make sense of what connections would be viable with all of that information to review nowadays.
So you've highlighted the Fall Line Trail. Are there any other maybe regional connector paths or trails that are projected in this plan?
Yes. And so we have a few. One of them on the southern end is providing connections to the Appomattox River Trail, what's envisioned down there. And then we also have the East Coast Greenway. There is a previous alignment was one going through the, Pocahontas from Woodpecker and going through it and then going towards Stratton Park. We still think that is a viable connection. It just may be a more long-term connection than the one they are currently showing, which goes along Route 10 up to Stratton Park. And then we also have more of like the US Bike Route 1, which some of you may be familiar with and know that Old Gun is on US Bike Route 1. And so we are envisioning keeping that line. We don't necessarily know what the solution would be at that one. So when we get to addressing Old Gun, we would be reviewing what makes sense for that route.
Fantastic. So talking now a little bit about the survey, which is, again, it's open now and the closing date is December 1st. So we have about a week and change over the holiday to get any final comments. Could you talk a little bit about the survey, maybe show us what it looks like, and then talk a little bit about what is the most helpful feedback that you as transportation planners can get from survey respondents?
Yes. So if you click the survey button, it'll take you to our overall transportation survey page. We have the active transportation plan right here with the vision map survey. It'll give you a few facts, such as, the existing bikeways and trails plan was adopted in 2015, and also like public projects can cost between like 5 million and 10 million a mile just to right size individuals' expectations, and that it still takes 3 to 6 years to complete once we are actually funded. And so prior to providing your comments, we do ask you to view the story map so that you can have an understanding of how we got to those lines. And then,
And the story map is what we were just looking at, correct?
correct.
Okay.
Yes, the story map is just what we were looking at and went through. And then when you get to the survey, it has the facts again, ask you to view the story map, and it asks you for your contact information. And what we're looking for are either general comments for the network as a whole, or if you have location specific comments like areas in Bon Air or areas along Route 1. And I think the most beneficial comments that we're looking for is, do you agree with the connections we're proposing? Do you think they achieve the goal of getting to the community destinations we've identified? Maybe, and then also just looking at, did we miss anything? Because we may not know about something, or it just got overlooked, and would really appreciate the public taking the time to dive in and provide comments.
So this is a Chesterfield County plan. Can people who maybe don't live in the county, maybe they just drive through it, maybe they work in the county or visit family or visit one of the parks in the county, can residents of other localities take the survey?
Yes, absolutely. It is a regional approach to build out these networks, and we are happy to hear from anyone who is in the surrounding localities, because there may be some ideas or things that they are aware of that we are not, traveling from outside the county into the county.
Can you speak a little bit as well to the comments that you do receive? Maybe there were folks who might watch this recording and think, well, I have something very impassioned to say. But how much confidence can respondents have that their comments will be read and received by your team?
Yeah, I would say you should feel very confident that we will review every comment. We have not only the Chesterfield County team that will be reviewing it, but we also have our consultants, Timmons, that will also be helping us sift through and come up with how we are going to address those comments.
Fantastic. I think that's all of my burning questions. We do have some people on the call with us, and I would like to open the floor up for anyone else who's on the call who has questions. You do have the ability to unmute yourself, so we can just popcorn and go right ahead. Oh, I see a question coming up in the chat, so I will read that. From Elliot from the East Coast Greenway. He says, any updates that can be shared about specific projects for the Stratton Park to Pocahontas State Park bike ped connection?
Let's see. That's Pocahontas. So, well, I understand we've gotten the comments that the bike lanes along Route 10 are not comfortable and people don't like to use them. We do have existing bike lanes along there. And with an update to this plan, I believe that we would be able to hopefully get development on the hook along Route 10 to keep building out towards Pocahontas. And some of the ones that may be more short term is an access through Courthouse Road. We are funded to go from the county complex to Fallow Drive, and our next goal is to go after funding for Courthouse Road shared use path to get to the first parking lot. So I think that may be the more near term alignment that makes it to the park. But that is also a part of the prioritization, is that we'll start looking at our regional routes and seeing what segments make sense to install first.
Could you zoom in on Stratton Park a little bit? I think when we
Yeah.
looked at the map a couple of days ago, there was some interesting plans for maybe crossing over Chippenham Parkway. Could you talk a little bit about what we see here at Stratton Park?
Yes. So I believe, sorry, we would like to see a facility that goes through the interchange. Currently there is nothing there, and so that would likely require an interchange modification. Another option that we have here that has no existing facility is also to go under, I can't recall if it's underneath or above Chippenham, right here to the west, and that could serve as another connection that doesn't necessarily route people through the interchange. And that, to my knowledge, would likely be built with development as it comes in that corner.
Thank you. Any other questions from the group?
Yeah, I got a question. I live in Bon Air and I work in the city and ride my bike into the city, as well as to the river a lot. And I think what specific to Bon Air, but applies to the rest of the county as well, is connection to the city and the rest of the counties. And so like looking here, like Huguenot goes all the way down to the river, and of course Forest Hill goes down into the city and connects to like the James River Park. Um, is there much consideration for how this plan connects into with like the city and nearby city parks? Yeah, you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So primarily, I would say that a lot of these lines were a result of coordinating with Plan RVA when they were updating their bike ped RVA plan. And so with that, there was an envisioned route to cross the river on Huguenot. And in order to be in line with that, and we are agreeable that a connection into the city on Huguenot would make sense. So that is why we are showing this line. And specifically to Bon Air too, we have built out a decent amount of the special area plan recently. And so
Yeah.
with that completed infrastructure, that allows us to continue to build out that network from those endpoints and try to get those meaningful connections in the interim as we fully build out.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible that that red line goes behind the elementary school there, and
Yes,
after that was built, I mean I ride back there all the time. There's just constantly people walking around, walking their dogs, kids riding their bikes. Like it's just, I mean, it looks right there like it's such a short section. Maybe in the grand scheme of things it is, but it definitely makes like a big impact on the community. So like I think it's amazing to think about what the potential is for like a large scale like pedestrian infrastructure and how it could like positively impact the community.
absolutely. I would, excuse me, I would say that Bon Air is probably the best example the county has today about of multimodal infrastructure because we have signage on the road for these low volume subdivision roads and then a separated shared use path at other locations to get them to these destinations and connect them to the network. And so I think we're going to be looking to Bon Air to expand our network more or use as a lessons learned.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier also about a bike lane. I think maybe it was a Route 10, not sure. That like there's a bike lane there, but it's like people don't feel that it's very comfortable. I'm
Yes.
wondering, and you can defer this if this isn't part of the scope of this plan, but thinking about bike and pedestrian infrastructure and what is like good versus best infrastructure, is there like, are we looking at, hardened, separated bike lanes, versus just paint on the roads? Is that part of this plan? Is that part of like where people should be commenting about it? There's some signs that like, oh, if we could improve this one sign, it could be better. That kind of really nitty gritty detail. Is that part of this plan? Is that part of the survey?
I would say yes, provide that input because the next step is to draft our chapter for the comprehensive plan. And I know one of the discussions will be like safe crossings at intersections, and maybe even like safe sign, additional signage so that individuals are aware of bikes and peds in the area. And so definitely, if you have nitty-gritty comments, we will take them and try to incorporate them as we can. But in terms of like Route 10, just because of what the county has been working towards, we do have a recently adopted special area plan. And so that is showing a shared use path on one side and sidewalk on the other. And so as development comes in, we would be upgrading these bike lanes to shared use path as well.
Cool.
That's really exciting to hear, JJ. While we're kind of zooming in on specific areas on the map, could we take a look at the Stonebridge area, where Chippenham and Midlothian Turnpike intersect, and talk a little bit about some of the lines that we see there? Now, if you're not familiar with this area, for those of you who are on the call or watching the recording, this is an area where we did just unfortunately have a fatality earlier this year, right underneath the interchange or close to it. So I'm particularly interested in what options we see in the plan here.
Yes. And so, for example, along Route 60, we are envisioning a shared use path along this corridor. And one of the, I would say, key barriers to this going from Chesterfield into the city of Richmond is this interchange. And we are currently studying it and looking at two options that would either provide a sidewalk or a shared use path. And we just haven't gotten final buy off on it, but we're hoping to move forward with the option that would allow a shared use path through the interchange to connect the city and the county, as well as provide better access to the future BRT that will be coming through this from GRTC. And some of these other ones too is this Providence? Let me make sure. Yes, so Providence Road is being maintained on our bikeways and trails plan, and that will connect a lot of the neighborhoods up into this activity center, for lack of a better word, to get to some of these destinations. And this is actually, a lot of this is likely, at least the ones connecting up to 60 may get built with development as it comes in. And so it may not be a public project. Some of these lines in the Spring Line and Stonebridge area on the top, but we are actively pursuing installing infrastructure along 60. And just to also let people know, we are funded currently to get a wide, we call it a wide sidewalk. It's 8 foot wide. We're going from Ruthers to, I believe it's right here. And then we have another project that is getting wide sidewalk down to Stonebridge. And then it upgrades to a shared use path into the city. And that is an interim condition until we can address the interchange issue.
So I know we're talking specifically about Chesterfield County here, but just to emphasize the meaningful connections concept here, there is a bike lane on Warwick Road in the city, so in this kind of grayed out area. So a meaningful connection from Warwick Road's bike lane could potentially connect people all the way from, I think, all the way down almost to 95 on Warwick Road. So neighborhoods all the way into Richmond South Side, all the way up to Midlothian Turnpike. So I would definitely say that that would be a meaningful connection.
Absolutely. And I believe the first phase of the GRC BRT would be having a station at this location. And so the currently funded project would get them to that area. And so once that is constructed, it's another regional mode of transportation that can get you into the city and other areas.
Any other questions from our attendees?
I got a hyper specific question
Yeah.
about Bon Air. I've actually seen the Timmins crew out there surveying along Forest Hill from Burroughs into Bon Air. I was wondering what the plan is and what kind of timeline, if you have any idea.
I It's not my project. I know there is a project along Forest Hill Road, but I could get back to you. I know you said you were going to email me, Hank, so I could
Yeah,
respond to that and give you an update on that project if it's the one that I'm thinking of.
cool.
Great. So, JJ, could you just zoom out one more time and show us the full breadth of the active transportation plan in the county? Amazing. Um, this is really exciting stuff. Is there anything else that you'd like to highlight in terms of feedback or input or submitting the survey before we sign off?
Yeah. I think the one thing that I would mention is that if there's an area that you feel you would like to talk to me about, in more depth than you can convey in the comments, I am more than happy to meet with you, one-on-one, just to talk through those if that is something you are interested in.
And
I think I have a follow-up to that. We had this survey that's open until December 1st. And then what's the next steps from there as far as community engagement, plan development?
Yes, so the next step would be to prioritize the network in order to fiscally constrain it. And we would also have a draft of the chapter for the comprehensive plan. And then we would come back out to the public again to get input on those. And that's when we would really love to hear individuals' input on if we are prioritizing or if they agree with our prioritization.
Gotcha. What kind of timeline do you think for that?
We are hoping to be back out to the public, I would say late winter, early spring, and we're hoping to have a fully adopted plan by the end of summer next year.
Okay. Awesome.
JJ, when you say fiscally constrained, I know that's so very important verbiage there that maybe is not totally clear to us, although we probably all understand what it feels like to be fiscally constrained. But could you just talk a little bit about what exactly that means?
Yes. So we are, limited with the fund sources that we can go after. We have CVTA, we have CMAC at the federal level, Smart Scale. And so there's only a limited amount of money that is available to the state and region, as well as once you start applying, you're competing with a lot of individuals. And so we're going to look at what we've historically been successful at obtaining with these funding applications so that we can figure out what we can spend in the next, or what we would have available in the next 20 years, estimated, and see based on, an average of how much this infrastructure would cost to build out, how much of that total amount that we would have in the 20 years can be used to assign to a piece of the network.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So before we log off, could you maybe just walk us through the visual on the web pages of how exactly to access the survey, or how exactly to access the landing page for the active transportation plan, which I think will bring you to everything. And I will be posting a link to the survey, of course, with the recording of this.
Yes. Oh, it's just not thinking. Maybe if I start with this one. Let's get to transportation. Okay. Or let me start at the home page. So if you were to come to chesterfield.gov, you can go to departments and go to transportation. There, you can go to either the transportation projects on the left, or you can scroll down and click on projects and studies managed by transportation. And then if you expand all transportation projects, fortunately, it's right at the top because it's alphabetical order. Click on the active transportation plan. That will take you to the web page for the project. And this is where it will have all of our information. You can click on here to view the story map, and you can click on here down here to complete the survey. And then as you go through, the story map, it has additional links to that survey as well, as we previously showed right here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for walking us through all of this, JJ. This is such an exciting time for the county, and we're so excited to see the county prioritizing bike and pedestrian improvements in the future. I see some round of applause coming from our attendees for this meeting. So thank you again for your time. I will be posting this recording on Sports Backers YouTube channel. So if anyone who's here with us today wants to share it out with their friends and family, that's where you can find it. Again, thank you all so much for attending, and we just appreciate your time, and we hope that you have a great holiday weekend.
Yeah, it was great being here, and I'm glad to talk about this plan. It's very exciting with the county moving towards this direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.